Welcome, everyone, to the Shadowfire Promotions podcast, Front Row Ringside. This is, today's date is the 28th of June, 2015. Now, this is our second week of Front Row Ringside in iTunes, so for those of you who are new to Shadowfire Promotions, the Shadowfire Promotions brand, I'm going to talk just a little bit about what you're going to expect in this edition, as well as some future editions. The first thing we're going to talk about is Shadowfire Promotions. We are your Chicago source for wrestling, so first and foremost, we are primarily a pro wrestling media and memorabilia distribution company. Now, what that means is, if you are a pro wrestler or a mixed martial arts fighter and you have merchandise, we will work with you, we will team with you to go and help get you another avenue of promotion for your product. So, via our own website and social media and this podcast and everything else. But if you're interested in more information on that kind of thing, we'll talk about that a little later on. What we're going to expect on this podcast is going to be a lot of talk about mixed martial arts, the Ultimate Fighting Championship, Bellator, that sort of thing. Maybe some past promotions that are now closed. Kind of not really like news or anything, because that's not really what we do. We're not really a news site, but just interesting things in the world of mixed martial arts and professional wrestling. WWE, Total Nonstop Action, Ring of Honor, several other promotions, some independent promotions. So a lot of talk about that, plus some stuff in the news as it relates to the military, specifically the Marine Corps and veterans and stuff like that, but also some talk about music and movies and that sort of thing, because we do a lot of work with music and movies and comics and that type of deal. So expect a lot of that. So now that you know a little bit about the Shadowfire Promotions brand, welcome. If you're new to this podcast, hey, we don't got an advertising budget. We don't got sponsors. If you want to chuck some cash my way, by all means, I'll tell you how to do that. First and foremost, I know I said that a couple of times now, so it's not really first and foremost. However, I'm going to say it again. So if you're interested in chucking some cash my way, or any comments, complaints, requests to be interviewed on this podcast or anything else, you want to email podcast@sfpinchicago.com. SFP like Shadowfire Promotions, INC like Incorporated, Chicago.com. Altogether, we call it SFP Inc. Chicago. So podcast@sfpinchicago.com for anything you can think of regarding this here podcast right here. Okay, so next up, we are going to talk about mixed martial arts. We're going to talk about mixed martial arts first. And actually, you know what? I take that back. First off, we're going to talk about kind of the depressing stuff. Let's get all that stuff out of the way. If you listened to my last edition, I had said it was kind of a bad time for pro wrestling with the passing of Tommy Rogers, the Fantastics team, which was kind of an 80s, it was described as sort of a boy band tag team, two good-looking young guys, high flyers, good workers in the ring, kind of a spin-off of the Fabulous Ones, you know, the tuxedo sort of look. And then about 10 days after was the passing of the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. Dusty was definitely an iconic figure, a legend, a true legend in pro wrestling, where the term legend gets tossed around probably way too much. But Dusty was without a doubt a legend, and he will definitely be missed, as well as Tommy Rogers. And right now, I received word last week via the Cauliflower Alley Club, and I'll talk about that in a little bit too, that Blackjack Mulligan, who was the father of Barry and Kendall Windham, Barry and Kendall, I know that Barry had a run in the World Wrestling Federation, the WWF, in the early 90s, and in the early 80s as well, I believe. And his brother Kendall Windham, and both were long-time Mid-Atlantic mainstays. That territory World Championship Wrestling. I think they might have even done some work in Texas with World Class Championship Wrestling. So he was in the hospital for another type of surgery when he had a heart attack. So we certainly wish Blackjack Mulligan a very speedy recovery, because right now it's been a very bad month for pro wrestling. Buddy Landel, real name William Ansor, just recently died at the very young age of 53. He died, I believe it was the 22nd, which is kind of a bad day for fatalities. I'll get to that in just a second. Buddy Landel was in a car wreck, a very bad car accident. He went to the hospital, and he was checked out, and he went back home, and the next day his wife found him dead. So condolences to his wife. Buddy, the Nature Boy, Buddy Landel, was a direct ripoff of the Nature Boy, Buddy Rogers, and the second Nature Boy, Ric Flair. And much like Ric Flair had got the right to use the Nature Boy gimmick from Buddy Rogers, Buddy Landel, who I believe was given the Nature Boy gimmick from current WWE announcer Jerry Lawler, there was supposed to be build up to a Nature Boy versus Nature Boy feud, but unfortunately Buddy Landel's self-admitted and well-documented substance abuse problems prevented that from happening. And Buddy has had a lot of chances to wrestle, and unfortunately he had a lot of issues and didn't always make the best choices, but he probably could have gone much further than he did. He mostly kind of wrestled around Tennessee, and it's a real shame. But he later on he found religion, and he managed to make some smart investments along the way of the money that he did have. And he credits his wife, I believe 35 years they were married, for doing all this and giving him the freedom to only wrestle when he wanted to, and kind of helping him out and staying by his side when she really had no reason to do such because of his issues. And also a pioneer in women's wrestling, Cora has also passed away on that same day. She was 92, so she certainly lived a very full life. She is a member of the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame, and her daughter Debbie, I believe she still wrestles. I don't know if Debbie is still a current wrestler or not. But Cora once wrestled as a tag team with her daughter, making it, I believe, the only mother-daughter tag team in pro wrestling. Legit mother-daughter. In entertainment, we've had Dick Van Patten, the actor Dick Van Patten, who died of complications from diabetes. He was 86, and he always looked so much younger. I would have never believed that Dick Van Patten was 86. He always looked like he was about 50 or so, no matter what show he's in or what year. Van Patten was probably best known as Dad Tom Bradford in the TV show 8 is Enough, where that ran for 5 seasons from 77 to 81. And Van Patten started off his career as a child actor and just done, he's kind of like the king of all media. He's done stage, radio, television, movies. He did some stuff for Mel Brooks and Mel Brooks comedies. I personally remember him best as far as Mel Brooks films in Robin Hood Men in Tights, which was in true Mel Brooks fashion a spoof of all these different Robin Hood films, just a real send-up of all these different films. And Dick Van Patten's role was the Abbot. And so my favorite scene with him is coming down, they're saying, presenting the Abbot or whatever, and he's walking down, and he's, dressed like a Catholic abbot, right? And they're saying, good morrow, Abbot, good morrow. Good morrow, Abbot, good morrow. Good morrow, Abbot, good morrow. Hey, Abbot! I hate that guy. and he says it to the camera, very tongue-in-cheek sort of thing. But that was Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks was just really, his comedy was really out there, and it showed that he liked to cast a lot of mainstream actors who were not necessarily known for broad comedy in his films. So it really helped out, these films to have all these people doing it. So certainly, condolences to Mr. Van Patten's family. He is a very popular actor. And also a plane crash on the 22nd, see how that date keeps popping up over and over again, is the Oscar-winning film composer for Titanic, James Horner. He was the composer for the best original song for My Heart Will Go On for Titanic, and he also won an Oscar for the entire film score. So it was one Oscar for the Titanic film score and another for My Heart Will Go On. Patrick Macnee, the English actor who died on the 25th of June at his home in California, according to his son, Rupert. Macnee was known for playing in the 60s. He played Agent John Steed in The Avengers, and he's probably best known with his co-star Diana Rigg. And I think she was only one season. I don't remember. I remember seeing some of the reruns of The Avengers. It was a great television show, I thought, as I remember. And he has had such a great speaking voice. And later on in the 70s, he was the not the narrator, but the original introduction to Battlestar Galactica, the original series. He did the opening. He did the opening voiceover for the series. So it was like life out there, life here, possibly began out there. If you look it up, you can see it. And he also played. He was the head, the what do they call it? The Imperious Leader, I believe they called it, of the Cylons. So he was the voice of the Imperious Leader, and he also played Count Iblis in an episode of Battlestar Galactica. He was also played. He also played alongside Roger Moore in the James Bond film View to a Kill, and Sir Roger Moore has also gone and put his condolences to Mr. Macnee. And finally, just earlier today, June 28th, at age 67, progressive rock pioneer, founding bassist of the prog rock band Yes, Chris Squire, passed away. He had been diagnosed with a form of leukemia early in the year, and the band had just confirmed his death. Chris Squire, of course, aside from being the founding bassist of the band Yes, which was definitely a prog rock pioneer. You certainly hear a couple of their tunes on classic rock radio. They were way more than what you hear on classic rock radio, that's for sure. But besides being a pioneer of the progressive rock genre, Chris Squire was the sole constant member of Yes. A lot of these bands have gone through just all sorts of lineup changes. King Crimson and Yes and all these things, even Genesis. And so he was the sole constant member of the band in all of its incarnations. So now that we're all done with all this depressing stuff here, let's go and talk some mixed martial arts. Just, I think it was last week, I don't have the exact date in front of me, we had free on Spike TV, we had the fight between Kimbo Slice and Ken Shamrock. And a lot of people have said that that this fight was a load of bunk. This is the clean version here. We don't have an explicit version. There's one podcast that's explicit, but we try real hard to keep the language toned down. One, because Apple doesn't like it. Two, because I don't like it, because there's no reason to limit the podcast to adults only. We don't have enough of an audience to be trying to segment it. This isn't the Stone Cold Steve Austin thing where I can do Unleashed and, open up all sorts of cans of audio, whatever. And that's Steve Austin's thing, to do the explicit and then the clean version, and he has enough of an audience, both, that are interested in his explicit and his family-friendly, that he can afford to do two podcasts. There's obviously enough for him to talk about that he can do this. We don't really have that kind of audience that we want to be doing that kind of a thing yet. But a lot of people, the Ultimate Fighting Championship commentator Joe Rogan, former Ultimate Fighter finalist Brendan Schaub, have both commented that they thought the fight seemed suspicious. I saw the fight on YouTube. There was definitely a couple of things that didn't look like any UFC fight or any mixed martial arts fight that I've ever seen. It just seemed very, very sterile and safe and clean, and it just didn't seem like a very very interesting fight. It just didn't seem right for some reason. Figure 4 Weekly editor Brian Alvarez, a former pro wrestler, has said, well, let's attribute it to the fact that Ken Shamrock is 51 years old and Kimbo Slice is 10 years younger than him, and neither one have really had outstanding careers, but Ken Shamrock has not. He claimed that he didn't feel Shamrock had a major victory since fighting Dan Severn in the original Ultimate Fighting Championship of UFC 6. But Ken Shamrock, the longer he goes on, is getting some more high-profile losses. He had a very high-profile series of losses to Tito Ortiz a couple of years back. So I think that every fighter, every wrestler should be able to determine on their own when it's time to retire. But the longer that Ken Shamrock continues to fight, the more his reputation as the world's most dangerous man gets damaged. So, excuse me, I think I'm beginning to sound a little like Peter Brady. Time to change! Ultimate Fighting Championship strawweight female fighter, Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Hope I pronounced that right. I think I was trying to pronounce it as every time Joe Rogan had said it, when she had faced off for the strawweight championship at the end of the Ultimate Fighter. She's going to look like a very dominant fighter in her division as much as Ronda Rousey is in her division. And for UFC President Dana White, who had once famously said that women would never be allowed in the UFC, he's certainly having a nice big heaping helping of crow right now about that. But I think that Dana's taking it in stride because, obviously Ronda Rousey is making him just tons of money. And I'm sure that Joanna Jędrzejczyk will make some money for him as well. So let's talk next about, let's see, I think that's just about it with mixed martial arts here as I kind of scroll through my notes. So we're going to move on to pro wrestling right now, pro wrestling and pro wrestling news, and then from there we'll talk about music and movies a little bit. So the first thing we're going to talk about is, and this is kind of a, it's kind of all WWE right now, most everything is going to be, but Davey Boy Smith, the late Davey Boy Smith, he was one half of the British Bulldogs tag team. He's a two-time former tag team champion, at least two-time former. He's a former European champion and a former Intercontinental champion, if memory serves. Is he an Intercontinental? I have to look that one up. I'm pretty sure he was, but in any case, There's a petition going around, I mentioned this last podcast, that Davey Boy, there's a petition going around for Davey Boy to get into the WWE Hall of Fame. Davey Boy's petition is being signed by a lot of high-profile celebrities, a lot of high-profile wrestlers, and they'll definitely get a lot of signatures on their petition, without a doubt. I don't know what their goal is signature-wise, but they're definitely going to get a lot of signatures. Steve Austin even had said on his podcast that he felt that Davey Boy Smith belonged in the Hall of Fame. I could definitely see, if Davey Boy were to get in, I could definitely see his son, Harry Smith, rather. His son, I think that's his, yeah, it is his son, right? I don't know. Anyway, I could definitely see Harry Smith, who is a spitting image of his dad, by the way, inducting him. But the big question is going to be whether WWE would want to induct Davey Boy into the Hall of Fame. WWE has kind of made it known that they're not really liking going and putting deceased wrestlers in the Hall of Fame because, and I kind of see their point with it, they kind of feel that it's sort of a downer sort of a thing, and they prefer not to do it, and it calls attention to the fact that there's a lot of dead people in pro wrestling, which is something else that WWE really does not like to go and call attention to. Davey Boy does not have to be the headliner, so that you can kind of say, well, what if Davey Boy wasn't like the main draw of the Hall of Fame? Then what? Well, okay, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. The big question is going to be, would WWE want to induct him? It's not a matter of whether he qualifies or not. I mean, he certainly qualifies. Not that there's any real, qualifications. There's no, much like a lot of Hall of Fames, there's not really a set of standards that says, okay, if you do X, Y, and Z, then you are eligible for the Hall of Fame. This is not one of those things. It's not like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, where there's at least some rules. I mean, a lot of it has to do with Rolling Stone editor John Wenner and his personal prejudices and likes and dislikes and stuff. But even the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is meant to be a profit center, much like WWE's Hall of Fame. So everything is going to be kind of prejudiced under the light of, will this draw us money if we put out a DVD of it? With the WWE putting all their pay-per-views onto the WWE network, they always want WrestleMania, which is where the Hall of Fame takes place before WrestleMania. They always want WrestleMania to be live in the U.S., but the Hall of Fame is the night before, so there's theoretically nothing to stop them from giving Davey a posthumous induction to the WWE Hall of Fame. They could have him represented by Harry Smith. They could have him represented maybe by Diana Hart, or I think at the time of his death he was dating another Hart sister, as memory serves. So it's not inconceivable. The issue would be if WWE feels it is something that would draw money for them, because in the end, as I say, the Hall of Fame to WWE is a profit center. They want to make money off of it. So, there's certainly enough footage of Davey Boy on the WWE network that they could go and make money off him. There's nothing that says that Davey Boy would not be a draw, and certainly a draw in England. It would make his UK fans very, very happy. But again, it's a matter of if WWE wants to, and WWE kind of has their own agenda of what they want to do. Personally, I'd like to see it happen. But, maybe somewhere down the line, that's WWE's plan to put Davey Boy in a Hall of Fame. WWE is very kind of tight-lipped about who they're going to induct into the Hall of Fame, and they have, at times, some very curious choices regarding that. So, really, time will tell. I'm not sure if a petition is going to speed things up, slow it down, what have you, but we'll see what happens with that. That is going to be something very, very interesting to see. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the new thing, the new trend, I guess, in wrestling, where pro wrestling just absolutely has to have, by letter of the law, you have to have this evil authority figure that's out to just screw that heroic fan favorite. He's just out to stick it to him, and that sort of originated after about 97, 98, after the events of Survivor Series 97, which has kind of turned the Montreal screw job, when Bret Hart was kind of legitimately screwed over. There was a completely different, unplanned ending to Bret Hart's title match with Shawn Michaels other than what was discussed. And that sort of became an infamous sort of a thing. Like I say, the Montreal screw job, and the fallout from that, because Bret at the time was shooting a documentary, so he was mic'd up, and the microphones kind of caught his, well, the microphones, not kind of, they did. The microphones caught his discussion with Vince McMahon regarding the ending to his match, and what eventually happened was basically Vince McMahon going against his word to Bret, and the backlash from that, he created the Mr. McMahon character, the evil corporate head who's out to go and, just really stick it to anyone that he deems not worthy and pick his own, corporate champion, if you will. And ever since then, they've always had that sort of a thing. Right now it's Stephanie McMahon and her real-life husband, Triple H. They're the authority. They've had the McMahon-Helmsley faction in the past, but ever since 1997, 1998, they've always had this evil, bad, authoritative figure who is untouchable in every single way, and is out to really put the nuts, or whatever is the expression, on the heroic fan favorite. I find this to be lazy, tired booking, and because the whole idea that you're untouchable in every single way, basically, it's like, okay, if your top fan favorite has to bow to your whims because you'll fire him or something else, it's a heat-stealing gimmick is what I kind of refer to it as. I think I read that term somewhere, but it's a heat-stealing thing, because it takes, it may add sympathy to the fan favorite, but the idea is not that you want your fan favorite to be viewed as this unlucky guy who's always getting screwed over and always has to bow to the face of authority. You want it to be this heroic guy who's, who kind of rides away into the sunset with the girl at the end of the day. You don't want him to be this kind of sad sack who, yes, yes, whatever, I got screwed. I guess that's my bad kind of thing. You don't really want that. And from the rule-breaking side, it doesn't help your top rule breaker any, because not only does it make him look inefficient, that you have to have the evil authority figure to help you out. It makes you look inefficient as a rule breaker, and it doesn't give him any additional heat it takes all away and places it on the evil authority figure. So it's kind of a heat stealer all the way around and doesn't do any good for anybody. And really, as I said, it's lazy, tired booking. It's WWE kind of just loves doing it because the McMahon family just loves to be on television and do this. And, there's the highest rated program on USA, so USA, wants to put the McMahons on there. But the people on USA Network have no clue whatsoever about wrestling, so they don't really know, they just know, hey, it's our highest rated show. Well, that's because USA doesn't have a whole lot going on for them. Their highest rated show is, wrestling, so, which is typically a historically low rated kind of show. Raw draws in good numbers, but in the end it's still pro wrestling. But for whatever reason, Spike TV just says, oh, the McMahons are, we'll put them on TV. We think this is great television. They have no idea what that, that's really kind of destroying wrestling because they just don't know that much about wrestling one way or the other. But yeah, I kind of think it's overdone as a wrestling gimmick, and really something else should be done. It's just really getting old and tired and stale. I mean, you've got an idea that's almost 20 years old. They've been doing the same thing with just, with a different form, but virtually the same thing, the same players for over 20 years, well, nearly 20 years, I should say, right now. The other reason WWE likes to do it is because they figure, hey, wrestlers come and go, but the McMahon family is always going to be here, so we can have our people, pretend to be in charge and do this evil rule-breaking, so let's move on from there. Now, a little talk about language. No, not like cursing or anything like that, but WWE likes to have their own language. They like to kind of dance around certain things. They don't like the word wrestle. They don't like athletes. They don't like the word sport. It's got to all be entertainment. They don't wrestle. They perform. They're not wrestlers. They're not athletes. They're entertainers, which is just dumb. But WWE wants to do everything they can to distance themselves from pro wrestling. And the funny thing is Vince McMahon, of course, has this real distaste for pro wrestling, yet that's what he is. He's pro wrestling, and he calls it, we're sports entertainment. They're not athletes, they're entertainers. There's not titles and championships, because that would involve us being a sport. Yeah, and he dances around it so much, but the funny thing is, of course, obviously that's what he's involved in. And he can use whatever language he likes, but no one else uses the same language that he does. So he can call them entertainers. He can say this is sports entertainment. No one else does. Everyone still calls it pro wrestling. And this was something that I'd commented on recently when someone was talking about, amateur wrestling or collegiate wrestling or whatever. They said, it has to be rebranded because, it's not a good term, amateur wrestling. And someone had made the comment, well, WWE doesn't even call their guys wrestlers anymore. And I had made the comment, yeah, they don't call them wrestlers, but everyone else does. No one goes and says, hey, Jimmy, what'd you do this weekend? Oh, I went and saw some sports entertainment. And I said, I saw some pro wrestling. I went to the pro wrestling matches. I didn't go to the sports entertainment show. No one says that. Vince McMahon and WWE can dance around it all they want, but in the end, it's still pro wrestling. And with regard to that topic, the word perform versus the word wrestle, I've long kind of had a thing, it just kind of sets me off, like, to hear, well, I went and performed in front of 70,000 people. No, you wrestled in front of 70,000 people. Perform is like, brings to mind like figure skating or ballet or something, not pro wrestling. It just doesn't make a lot of sense in that context. You can say, yeah, I went out there and I wrestled and I lost, and, I'm not really happy with my performance out there, because that's acceptable because everyone uses that term. I lost a baseball game, originally have my performance on the diamond. Wasn't really fond of my performance when I was up to bat, and I didn't perform too well out in the field. When I was at football, I missed that catch. I didn't really feel it was my best performance out in the field. That's one thing. But to say, I went and performed all over the world, like a ballet dancer, doing little pirouettes, you performed, or did you wrestle? Yes, it's a work, but the way they kind of dance around things, we have to use only certain terminology because, God forbid, someone might think we're an actual sport. Unless you're mentally deficient, no one is thinking pro wrestling is an actual sport. No one thought pro wrestling was an actual sport even before they admitted that it was a work. It's a little silly. And that always kind of just irked me. It's like, I performed in front of 70,000 people. No, you didn't. You're not a dancer. And, that's kind of my other thing where WWE says, well, we're not a sport, we're entertainment, because sports are definitely not entertaining. I mean, let me tell you, if you go to the baseball game and you say, gosh, Dad, thanks for bringing me to this baseball game. It was really great. I was really entertained. It's like, no, you weren't, son. Wash your mouth out with soap. You were not entertained. When Michael Jordan was out there and doing a layup on his tongue, that was definitely not entertainment. Boring. Dennis Rodman with the multicolored hair, very boring because he's in sports, and so he can't be entertaining. That was very bland and boring. The Blackhawks, when they won the Stanley Cup, that was very boring. Those best of seven was very boring because it was a sport, and sports cannot be entertaining in any way. According to the WWF, or excuse me, the WWE, sports cannot be entertaining. If you were entertained by a sport, you're going to get locked up, go to prison. Sports are not entertaining. Entertainment's entertainment. Sport's a sport. They're never the same. So the WWE Network, WWE is now putting all their pay-per-view events on the WWE Network. For the purpose of this podcast and the other thing that we do, we're still going to call them pay-per-views. Why? Because it's just easier. We're not going to call them their special shows or whatever because that's just silly. We'll just call them the pay-per-views. So it seems like they're doing this thing where the first month is always going to be free for new subscribers because they've had this for kind of a while now. So I'm thinking that's going to be their new thing just permanently to kind of hook you in and say, well, if you're a new subscriber, we'll give you the first month free. You don't have to put up your credit card. And all in all, putting all the former pay-per-views on the network is a good risk for WWE. Because one, with a pay-per-view, the cable company generally gets half of it right up front, and then you get your cut several months later. I remember Howard Stern once saying when he did a pay-per-view, he said, I'm never doing it again because it's a load of bunk. He didn't quite say it that way, but he said, I hate the notion of the cable company gets their cut right from the start, and then you're waiting like 5 or 6 months before you get your money from the cable company. Vince McMahon kind of wants to present the notion that traditional cable and traditional pay-per-view are dying. I don't think so. There's still plenty of people that subscribe to Comcast and AT&T, Uverse, and all that. So I don't think cable's going anywhere. I don't think pay-per-view is going anywhere. He'd like to present it as such because he doesn't want to admit that pay-per-view buys were declining. And the reason that the pay-per-view buys are declining is a couple of reasons. One is because they really weren't terribly entertaining shows. And two, it's difficult for the writing team and the creative team to have to come up with more than 6 hours of television each week, and then once a month they have to come up with a pay-per-view that's another 3 hours worth of television that is different from what they're doing. It can't be just like a 3-hour, it can't just be like in their television show. It has to be something special because you're asking people to part with 40 or 50 bucks once every 3 weeks. So with the WWE Network, you don't have to have someone hyping a pay-per-view on television once every 3 months and asking people to part with $50 or whatever it is. Now you just spend $9.99 a month and get all the pay-per-views, all the original programming, whatever they have, all this other stuff, NXT, the podcast that, Steve Austin or anyone does with WWE. You get all that for $10 a month. And if you're into that, if you're into this whole streaming and everything, it can definitely be a good thing. From our perspective, there's nothing like good old-fashioned physical media because, this stuff comes and goes. And it's not, it's, well, yeah, you have it, but it's whatever is showing at that time. You're not always going to have it. So I don't think that the Shadowfire Promotions business model of DVDs and VHS and CDs and stuff is going anywhere either. But it's definitely low risk and great reward for WWE to say, hey, just hype one thing, the network. Always about the network, the network, the network. You can see all the shows, all the pay-per-views and everything on the network, and then they don't have to go and show a pay-per-view, and it's more money in their pocket in the end, and it's, direct to them. They don't have cable companies taking a cut out of it anymore. And there's always going to be the risk of some people, maybe older people or people that, aren't that high-tech or whatever, not wanting to stream things, but clearly, in the case of WWE, that's a calculated risk. They're willing to say that much of the audience isn't really worth chasing after. It's a very small percentage of the audience. Presumably they've done the research into that and said, well, it's a risk we're willing to take. Something else about the network, not necessarily about the network as a whole, but about one program in particular on the network is NXT, which is WWE's developmental brand. And Triple H, who's in charge of that, has said, well, as one of his goals, he'd like to make it an equal to Raw and SmackDown, the WWE's two main shows, and he'd love to have it be this big touring brand right at the same level as all that. And he really should resist the temptation to do that. I know there's money involved in that, and they want to have more money by making it a regular touring federation and all this, but WWE, if they were to do something like that, they'd really paint themselves into a corner because they have this performance center where they say, hey, we'll take anyone off the street and we'll make you into a wrestler. All these celebrities from other sports, and they say, oh, yeah, come on, we'll make you into a wrestler later on. And but then they still don't have a place for a person to get their feet wet in front of a live crowd. I mean, maybe you could do an untelevised match before Raw or something, but there's no real place where you can get guys to get their feet wet, to try out new gimmicks like they've given to all these former Ring of Honor guys, Prince Nana and Kevin Steen, who's now Kevin Owens, Prince Nana, who's Finn Balor, and the former Kenta Kobashi, who's now Hideo Itami, I believe they call him, and all these other guys, and the WWE's painted themselves into this corner a while back, about 20 years ago, maybe, or about 30 years ago, I guess. About 30 years ago, in the early 1980s, when Vince McMahon acquired the World Wrestling Federation from his dad, pro wrestling was not the way it is today. It was very regional. There was about 24 or so different promoters that were running full-time wrestling promotions in different states or different cities or different regions. Sometimes they controlled several states. You had guys like Bill Watts who had like Texas and Louisiana and Oklahoma, and he had, those were kind of his states, and he ran out of there. And other guys wrestled in Detroit. But all these territories were all full-time, active promotions, television, the whole 9 yards. and they all kind of agreed to not overstep anyone's territorial boundaries. So it's all kind of a handshake agreement, but it worked well for them. And Vince McMahon, when he acquired the WWF, he's like, oh, I don't believe in this crap, this is all nonsense kind of thing. And he proceeded to go and basically rape, pillage, and burn, and basically take away all these top stars, to starve these territorial promotions of their talent and watch them slowly die out, at which, then he'd buy the federation, the TV time, and everything else, and put on his shows, and he just kind of kept on doing that until basically everyone went out of business. And when he first started doing that and acquiring all these new guys, that was fine, because these guys already wrestled on TV before. They were, already trained, already seasoned wrestlers. But now with all these regional promotions gone, Vince McMahon kind of faces the dilemma of, hey, where do all these wrestlers come from? There's no place for them to train. There's no place for them to work. I mean, you could go to the wonderful, wacky world of independent wrestling, but these guys, for the most part, are not on television. They'd have to be retrained to wrestle the way WWE wants you to wrestle, all that stuff. And so if they went and made NXT into a touring brand, you still face them of, okay, now what do we do for a developmental place where we can kind of test out new gimmicks and work with new wrestlers and all this. So they're going to shoot themselves in the foot if they do that. They really need to keep NXT where it is, be a developmental league. If a guy decides that, or if someone decides that a guy is ready to go up to the next level, and then send him up to WWE, send him up to the main roster, send him up to Raw or SmackDown or whatever. But don't try to make NXT into a third touring brand, because you're just going to end up shooting yourself in the foot. But I know that Triple H is eager to do that, because he wants to prove that NXT is his baby, and he wants to prove that it can be successful with his vision. So we'll see what happens with that, but hopefully NXT remains a developmental league in the future and continues to be kind of a proving ground for new, younger talent who might not have all this vast experience that perhaps someone on the main WWE roster might have. One other thing about the WWE Network and NXT and all these pay-per-views, NXT, from what I understand, is probably in a lot of ways doing better than a lot of the main WWE roster right now in terms of more people are into NXT, and that's why Triple H wants to kind of take this thing and make it into another money-drawing federation, another money-drawing brand, as opposed to just this developmental league, because, hey, people are paying attention to it, which, again, is understandable. And it goes to show, it kind of ties back in to what I was talking about earlier with authority figures, where you have to, even, WWE has a bad habit, a bad reputation of getting lazy when they're not challenged, either creatively or any other way, and they have to resist the temptation to be lazy, especially as it relates to their pay-per-view events. They still have to come up with this for extra hours, and even if you're giving your first month free, you're still going to have this continuous drop-off of people. They can brag, hey, we finally got 1 million people now that we opened up in Canada and the UK, but it's not always going to be 1 million. One day it could be 1 million, next day it could be 1.5 million, next day it could be 500,000. Obviously there's a very gross exaggeration, but the point remains that just because you have it one day doesn't mean you're going to have it the next. Anyone who's ever done anything for subscription or anything else knows that, hey, great, you got, X number of people. You still going to have more than that the next day? Sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. So They have to kind of, one of the chief complaints of pay-per-view as it relates to WWE over the last several years was the price tag goes up and the quality goes down, and I'm watching basically an expanded edition of Monday Night Raw. Why am I paying $50 or $40 or whatever to see basically the same thing that I've been seeing the last 2 months on free TV? So, it's nice that Triple H is seeing success with NXT, but he has to resist going and trying to make it a viable third brand, because they're just always going to be in the same boat of where's the developmental. And I know there's going to be people that say, well, let's create another developmental federation. It's no big deal. They can afford to do that. We'll call it something else, and we'll make another developmental fed. Yeah, okay, and that's all good and well. What happens when whoever runs that says, gee, I'd like to make this into a real brand, a touring brand, and make some money with this. This could be so much better with all this great talent. So then what do? Well, you make it another touring brand, and hey, now you're at a developmental federation again. So it's kind of a catch-22, and you really are going to paint yourself into a corner if you try to make it this touring brand. So time will tell with what happens with that. Moving onwards, I think that's just about everything in pro wrestling. So we're going to talk a little bit about music, not anything, music news. If you've been keeping aware of what's going on recently, there's a running gag that a little girl's brought down Apple to its knees, so to speak, because Taylor Swift went and confronted Apple when they were apparently going and giving away a month free if you sign up for their streaming, and apparently they'd never really said when they were going to pay the artist while this free period was going on. They had apparently just said something along the lines of, yeah, I'll get it later. And Taylor kept pushing, okay, when later? Give me some details. Because, she wants to be paid for her art, which is certainly her prerogative. And so she kind of got Apple to back down and said, okay, yeah, we're going to pay right away. And it's the same thing recently with Spotify, where Taylor had taken on Spotify and pulled her music from Spotify, claiming that she wasn't getting paid enough to have her music on the streaming service. And it's understandable why Taylor feels that way, and certainly I'm sure other artists do, just that Taylor speaking up, probably because she's got enough money that she can. But, when you're streaming stuff, if you're streaming the stuff, whether it be free on Pandora or on the free version of Spotify or what have you, there's not a lot of money in that, and the artists want to make sure they get paid. And, with the whole notion of streaming everything and buying stuff for 99 cents from Apple or from Amazon or whatever, I'm sure the artists don't get a whole crap ton of money out of that. I remember reading an article once where an artist was basically laughed at when he said, what about all these digital downloads? And the label kind of laughed at him and said, yeah, right, we're not even tracking such small numbers. And the artist had said something, and I don't remember who it was. The artist said something like, yeah, small numbers to you, but I'm still in debt to the label, so I want every penny that's coming to me. Don't give me as too small a track. Just because you're a millionaire doesn't mean I'm not. It doesn't mean that I am. I still want my money. But whatever they pay is obviously not a whole lot of money to the label, and the label's probably not paying the talent a whole ton out of it, if anything. I don't know if that's changed. And this can be directly attributable to the decline of MTV as it relates to playing music videos, VH1 for music videos, all these music channels that no longer play music on them. Instead, they're more interested in doing reality shows and more unscripted television rather than playing music. And as a result, there's nowhere for an artist to go and put out their music to show off. It used to be that MTV would play all these different music videos from your album. You could have 3, 4 singles, maybe more. When Shania Twain's second album came out, The Woman in Me, that was like half the album was singles. So it's real easy to say, oh wow, here's all these things, and whatever was not pushed as a single, well hey, you buy the album anyway because based on what you're already hearing, yeah, I want to buy it on the strength of what I am hearing. I'm going to buy the album based on the strength of what I'm hearing right now. You don't worry, there might be a song or two you don't like, oh well, you buy it on the strength of these other songs. But there's been no way with MTV no longer wanting to do music videos and VH1 not doing a lot of music videos and all this other stuff. The artist has to rely on radio to get their new stuff over, and the radio might only do 1 or 2 songs of yours, throughout the day, where MTV used to just do all new stuff all the time. There was a lot more chance for exposure that the artists are just not getting now. And so, even with music singles, when you used to be able to buy cassette and CD singles and stuff, there's just nothing. You say, oh, I don't even know the song. And they stopped selling CD singles, and you see that for the music industry says, oh, streaming is killing our business. Piracy is killing our business. No, what's killing your business is the fact that the CD costs about the same thing as it always has to make and produce and everything, but you're still charging more and more money, and there's still less and less music on the CD. Your average CD is only like 30 minutes or so, 10 tracks, and it's under 30 minutes. Not a whole lot, and you still want to be charging people close to $20 for a CD. So that's probably harming the music business more than anyone else. And that's why secondhand stores for CDs come in really handy to people that want to scavenge around because they don't want to have to pay full price for an album that they haven't heard anything off of. It doesn't matter what the artwork is or the lyrics or anything else that's inside the CD if you haven't heard what the music is on there yet. There's always going to be completists that are going to buy every single album put out by a certain artist, regardless of what's on there, which is terrific. But there's always going to be those people that say, well, can I at least, if you're going to have me buy this, I'll buy this, but I'd like to know what's on there before I bring it home. I might buy it eventually. I probably won't buy it when it first comes out. I might get it a couple of years down the road. Maybe if I see it in a resale shop or something, because I haven't really heard anything off the album, so I don't really know. So, the music industry kind of shot themselves in the foot with that, because they said, oh, more, Agreed is good. Hey, yeah, Agreed's terrific until it shoots you in the foot and someone says, I can no longer afford it. I can no longer afford to pay this money. I don't want to be paying $15 for a CD that's only 30 minutes of music. I'm paying, all this money for so little product. So, yeah, that's probably the reason why the music business is in kind of a dire straits it's in. Unfortunately, they're kind of just too stupid to realize it. And they probably won't ever realize it. And while we're on the topic of paying for services, I want to talk a little bit about software or phone apps or anything where they say, okay, here's the free version, then here's the paid version. And, my theory on that has always been, hey, give them a good free version, because if the free version is good, you say, wow, this free version is really good. Wow, I wonder what the paid version must be like if the free version is this good. Unfortunately, a lot of times, the free version ends up being just complete garbage, and say, well, you need to upgrade to the paid version for it to really get anything to work. You know, it's kind of like getting a bunch of light bulbs and no lamps and saying, well, yeah, you know, if you pay for lamps, we might give you something, you know, we might give you electricity or something, but, you know, you have all these lamps and no electricity, and you say, what good is this? You know, well, with the free version, we'll only give you the lamps. You really have to pay for the electricity separate in this, you know, thing. So that's sort of, shouldn't you have a really good free version? You know, that's always been my theory on something like that. You know, so share your experiences, whether, you know, your thoughts on streaming and MTV and all this stuff, you know. If you got a comment about the wrestling stuff, send it all to podcast at sfpincchicago.com. SFP like Shadowfire Promotions, incchicago.com, sfpincchicago.com, which is our website, coincidentally, sfpincchicago.com. Go visit our website. We are hoping, there's a lot of merchandise we have. We're hoping to have our website all done before the end of 2015, our main site, sfpincchicago.com. But if that does not happen, depends on how much new merchandise we get. The more new merchandise we get, the longer things take to get done, because new stuff has to get inventoried and cataloged. Then we have to go and create space and, you know, all that stuff. So we will see, but hopefully, definitely 2016, if we don't do it by the end of this year, we'll kind of see how that goes. That only applies to our main site, sfpincchicago.com, because once that is done, then we're going to start slowly opening up our other sites, SFP Music and Movies.sfpincchicago.com and SFP Comics.sfpincchicago.com and SFP Playboy for Playboy and Maxim and stuff, and all those types of good magazines. So, you know, these smaller sites we can deal with after the main site is open, because the amount of merchandise we have for comics and books and music and movies is much, much, much smaller in comparison to the SF Pink Chicago main site. But as much as we do buy your wrestling merchandise and your mixed martial arts merchandise, you know, your posters, your books, stuff like that, something else to keep in mind is that we'll, on occasion, we'll go and buy your mainstream books and music and movies, and we'll buy your collections of comics and stuff like that. You know, it's not our main thing, but we do sometimes buy it. You know, we're not going to do the same search service that we would for the mainstream sfpincchicago.com, where we'll track down that, you know, certain item for a fee, just because I'm not really sure it's a really good, viable service to have for stuff like comics and books and music and stuff. But we'll kind of see how that goes. We might add that in the future if it turns out that's something that people want. So we'll kind of see. We might. So anyway, you know, all of our other sites, the sfpcomics.sfpincchicago.com, SFP Music and Movies, .sfpincchicago.com and sfpplayboy.sfpincchicago.com. All these affiliate sites will be opening slowly throughout the year 2016. But in the meantime, if you're interested in something, you want to know what we have, we don't really have a full catalog of all of our comics and stuff. We just have stuff I can copy from our main inventory. But if you're interested in that, you can always send an email to orders like ORDERS at sfpincchicago.com, orders at sfpincchicago.com, sfpincchicago.com. Anything order related. If you got a question about a price on something, if you got a question on something that you ordered, if you have a question about what we have, anything like that should be addressed to orders at sfpincchicago.com. And also, for those who sent in postal mail requesting a catalog. I'd really prefer you send me an email because the digital catalog, is already on our website, and all you have to do is just go and download it. The regular version isn't really, the post version isn't really ready, and I don't really want to send someone an older version because we got all this great new merchandise in that we got to put into the catalog. So we're working on it. Get it to you in about a month or so. It takes a little bit of time. I was trying to focus on a few other tasks first, but I've had about a half a dozen requests, so I really don't want to gaff them off. Anyway, let's see. I think that's about it. So we're going to start wrapping things up here. We're going to start talking about our plugs, and then we'll move on to some of our merchandise, and then we'll kind of wrap this thing up. So first off, if you're in wrestling or fighting or anything else, all that stuff that's horrible on your neck and back, and I know I've been on the road a lot and sleeping in cars and couches, and all that stuff is murder. I do distance running, and that's certainly murder on my knees, if nothing else. But I want to go and tell you and encourage you to go and seek out a chiropractor. Again, ain't no sponsored dollars in this place. This is just giving a kind of a shout out to someone who's helped me out. I went to Chiro1, CHIROONE.net, Chiro1 of the Loop, downtown Chicago. You want to talk to Dr. Ed Gurovich. If you're there, make sure to let him know you heard it on Front Row Ringside, the Shadowfire Promotions podcast. Even if you're currently involved, say, well, I can't do any long-term healing and stuff because I'm just going to get my neck screwed up again when I go in for my next match, my next fight, whatever. He can at least give you I can't think of the word. I had it on the tip of my tongue. Unfortunately, I can't think of it, but he can give you kind of a just temporary thing. It'll just be to kind of help ease the pain. It'll be kind of a therapeutic sort of adjustment just to kind of help ease the pain. And after running for about half my life and sleeping in cars and stuff, I thought there was no way I would be able to continue on with my athletic career. I thought I'd have to give it up because I wasn't even able to stand or get up from a chair or anything like that without a lot of pain. But they probably added about 10 years back to my athletic career, so good on them, good on Dr. Ed for doing that. Let's see. My good friend Kimberly Cormican, she's got a book, Whatever Makes You Blind. She's working on another book right now, but I know that she'd really like if you went and bought her first book. It's called Whatever Makes You Blind. It's actually a really, really good book. I kind of went into it, and I wasn't sure if I'd like it or whatever, but I ended up really liking it. It was a really, really good book. I was really happy with it, and I know that she'd really appreciate if you buy it. You can get it on Amazon. You can get a digital download, Kimberly Cormican, and it's called Whatever Makes You Blind. It's a real good book, so go ahead, pick it up. Help a sister out, if you will. You would certainly be doing me a favor, especially if you let her know that you like it and you heard it on our podcast, Front Row Ringside, the Shadowfire Promotions podcast. See, one of my other, I'm not really working with anyone right now, so Nicholas Wautier of Wautier Entertainment. If you're listening to this podcast and if you're listening to it in iTunes, you definitely have to thank Nicholas Wautier, because Nick is the one that got me into iTunes. He's the one that set me up for subscribing via RSS. So if you're subscribing to this podcast, you have Nick to thank, because I knew nothing about podcasting. I knew I could do a voice recording. I knew I could make media and put it onto YouTube and stuff. But as far as actually creating an actual podcast and doing it so you could subscribe and getting into iTunes and all this cool stuff, that's all Nick. So make sure you seek out Nicholas Wautier or Wautier Entertainment. And, He's got a website, technopoly411.com, and it's pretty much what you'd expect it to be. It's a lot of information about technical stuff. Nick is a real big tech head, and he's got a lot of answers to anything technical. Podcasts, computers, cameras, just a web page design. Nick's given me a lot of advice on how to do website design. All sorts of other things. So definitely take the time to look up Nicholas Wautier, Wautier, Nicholas. Look him up. I've known Nick for a lot of years. He's a really good guy, real smart guy, and definitely someone to look up with your technical questions. He's got a podcast of his own too. You can look up his podcast. Subscribe to both of our podcasts, man. We both could use it, I'm sure. All right, so we've reached what I consider the fun part of this whole thing, where we get to talk about merchandise that's available. We're going to talk about some wrestling stuff that's available. This is going to be the kind of the cool part. If you look on our Facebook, which is facebook.com/SFPINC Chicago, SFP Chicago, you will see featured right there, pinned to the top, is Hitman Heart Wrestling with Shadows. This is the official 2-disc DVD. It's the 10th anniversary edition. It's not only the original documentary, but it also includes interviews with the filmmaker Paul J., his thoughts on what happened, the whole Montreal incident, which the DVD is based on, and the parallels to real life that it has. You also get on that second disc, you also get the life and death of Owen Hart. Owen was Bret's brother who died in a terrible accident in 1999. He was rappelling from the roof of the Kemper Arena. He was supposed to do a little stunt entrance, and something happened with his rappelling line. There was only a single line. There was no backup. There was no locking carabiner. And unfortunately, Owen fell something like 78 feet to the ring, and he died. And so that's kind of the little A&E biography, I believe, of Owen Hart, and that's really good, and you should check it out. And what you get, the bonus plan, is you pick up this DVD from us, and you get 2 lobby posters. They're exactly from the exact prints of what was used when this was screening in theaters in Canada. So it's the real deal. You get 1 poster that you're going to see a replica of on the Facebook page, and then you're going to get 1 that is the feature with the life and death of Owen Hart. So it's kind of a mix of the 2 cover arts. They're lobby posters. They're, gee, I forget how big they are. I don't have one sitting around my office that I could go and pull out and measure it for you, but they're very cool. And, so you get the DVD, 2 DVDs, 2 posters. Very, very cool. We're an exclusive distributor of this type of thing. It's very, very cool. I definitely suggest you pick it up. I've got it in my personal collection. Excuse me. If you are a fan of early Ring of Honor like 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, CM Punk, Colt Cabana, Prince Nana, Kevin Steen, Samoa Joe, all these guys from about 10 or 15 years ago, I got some great early DVDs of Ring of Honor, really, really good stuff. Of course, we've always got a large selection of old school World Wrestling Federation Coliseum video. We've got some World Championship Wrestling videos. There's some great videos of the American Wrestling Association, Larry Zbyszko and Rick Martel and a couple other great guys, Michael Hayes. We've got Brian Pillman, the Brian Pillman Memorial Show. It's a 5 VHS set. The Brian Pillman Memorial Show started after Brian's death in 1997, the year after. Heartland Wrestling Association, which if memory serves, it out of Cincinnati, where Brian is from. Yeah, they're out of Cincinnati. They had the Brian Pillman Memorial Show from 1998 through 2001. So this 5-tape set includes highlights of the Pillman Memorial Show from 98 to 2001, the complete 2001 show, and the 2001 Independent Showcase. And if you look at some of the names, you got Ron Waterman, you've got guys who would definitely go on to greater heights of fame in the World Wrestling Federation and World Championship Wrestling, and Extreme Championship Wrestling as well. And also what's cool is it's a unique situation in that because Brian Pillman competed in both World Championship Wrestling and the World Wrestling Federation, it's one of the rare times when the World Wrestling Federation wrestlers would be on the same show as a World Championship Wrestling star. They didn't compete against each other, because that was still kind of taboo, but they did appear on the same show, so that's very, very cool. If you are a fan of if you're in Europe, you want to see some World Championship Wrestling, some World Wrestling Entertainment, some total nonstop action, we've got some great stuff, a lot of recent stuff, the last 5 years or so. We've got a selection of VHS. We've got a selection of DVD. Most of the stuff is the last 5 years or so. About half of it is Region 2, and about half of it is Region 1. And if you're in the U.S. and you want to learn about this stuff, let me tell you that really is not that difficult to go and get a Region 2 VCR. It's actually very easy. If you're in the greater Chicago area, you can go to a place called World Import Gifts. You can look them up online. That's where I got all my Region 2 stuff from. Really good equipment, good prices, and you can watch Region 2. Get a Region Free set. It's very cool to see some European media and the differences between it. And an extra added bonus if you're a WWE fan is with different requirements regarding showing the WWF scratch logo that was featured pretty much from 1998 until the time they became World Wrestling Entertainment in about 2003. There was different rules in Europe, so they did not have to blur out the scratch logo in certain releases overseas. So that's something kind of interesting too. Let's see, what other cool stuff do we have here? A lot of early Randy Savage. Got a lot of, oh yes, we've got programs from the Cauliflower Alley Club, the Ring of Friendship, and I promised that I would talk a little bit about that, so let me do that right now. The Cauliflower Alley Club is a benevolent fraternal organization of people involved in the wrestling business. So basically it's a chance for these old school wrestlers to kind of meet up with their friends once again, to kind of talk and just have a place where they can all be together. And also, as you know, on the benevolent side, it's a 501c3, it's a nonprofit organization, and they do a lot of work to support retired wrestlers. A lot of guys end up in the ring, they don't have any insurance or anything, and so when they end up hurt at the end of their time, a lot of guys go without taking off time for surgery and stuff and just kind of work through it. But those little injuries that didn't mean a whole lot when you were 20 and 30 end up meaning a whole lot more once you're 60 and 70, and sometimes you just need a lot more medical help, and without any insurance it's very difficult sometimes to pay these bills. So the Cauliflower Alley Club, out of their benevolent fund, goes and helps out some of these guys that are down on their luck, guys that might need some extra money to pay their hospital bills, or guys that need help with their homes or something like that. I know that at the reunion every year in Las Vegas, they always have a raffle for a custom-made Cauliflower Alley Club title belt, and the money that they collect in that raffle all goes towards the benevolent fund. We have a set of Cauliflower Alley Club 50th anniversary Chuck Taylor, Converse Chuck Taylor high tops. They've got a Harley Race and I think Nick Bockwinkel and a couple other old school wrestlers on there. I think Luthez is on there. And, those shoes are available from us. And a portion of the profits from those shoes goes to the benevolent fund as well. And so it's a really good thing that you want to have. There was also, if you're a fan of women's wrestling in the 1980s, you might remember the Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, Glow. And Glow just in the last couple years had a documentary come out, an independent documentary called Glow, the story of the Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling. We picked up a copy at the Cauliflower Alley Club. It's a really good documentary, and it seems to kind of give a little bit of background about Glow and what kind of happened to a lot of the wrestlers when they started off, what they were doing before Glow and what they're kind of doing after Glow, and discussing what went into the making of Glow. And we have a copy of the DVD here. We got it signed by Lightning, all these Glow Girls Lightning, Tulsa, Hollywood, Little Egypt, and Melody Trouble Vixen, MTV. So great DVD here. And a note about autographed merchandise is that 9 out of 10 times, most of our autographed merchandise is going to be autographed. We're going to be the ones bringing it to an event and having someone autograph it. We generally shy away from getting autographed merchandise, especially autographed merchandise at high prices, from private vendors unless we know who they are, because we want to make sure that the signatures are authentic. And it's very difficult to, with all the signatures out on the internet and everything else, it's very hard to discern a decent fake if someone went and lifted a signature using Photoshop or something like that, and then, scanned it in and used a new DVD insert with a Photoshop program. So we try to get stuff where we can verify the signature if we have autographed merchandise. I'm not going to get, and then, with Glow, there's also one of the Glow girls, Roxy Astor, a good friend of ours. Roxy has been putting together a project of her own called the Afterglow Fan Party. And what she's been doing with that is she's been trying to get together with as many of the Glow girls as she can and have a very informal, loose, uncensored, just get-together with the Glow girls and the fans, a real intimate thing where the fans can come and ask anything they want and have an opportunity to hang out with the Glow girls for a couple hours in a real loose and relaxed environment. Just ask them anything they want, have a chance to come and just be up close and personal with the Glow girls. And what's cool about the Afterglow Fan Party is that each DVD you buy from us is going to be signed individually, hand-signed by Roxy Astor. She's going to sign every DVD. So when you order it, you got to say, hey, I want this message. So if you want to say, happy birthday, Jim, love your, wife, girlfriend. Hey, if your boss is a fan of Glow and you want to kiss some fan of theirs, hey, boss, sign it to the boss. But Roxy will put whatever message you want on that DVD. So that's very, very cool. And the monies that she's collecting from that, she wants to go and use it to continue to bring the Afterglow Fan Party to other cities. So, when you're buying this DVD from her, you're going and helping to support future Afterglow fan parties. So you can say, hey, I'm from New York, or I'm from LA, or I'm from Chicago, or, Miami or something. And hopefully, if there's enough people in that area that Roxy can reach out to, maybe she could bring the Afterglow fan party to you there. So that'd be really kind of cool. So last little bit of merchandise, we got a lot of world-class championship wrestling. We got a really rare tape called the Von Erich's Front Row Ringside, which is kind of where we stole the name Front Row Ringside from. We also stole it from one of the old Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazines. They used to have a column called Front Row Ringside, and the name kind of stuck with me. And also, there was something, I explained this last show, I'll probably continue to explain it for a while because we're kind of new on iTunes here. But I remember reading something about the Muppets and the two old hecklers in the balcony, Statler and Waldorf. And there was the comment that, yeah, Statler and Waldorf always give the Muppets a hard time. They go and talk about how awful the show is and everything. But the real running gag isn't that they're always insulting the shows or whatever. The real running gag is that at the end of it all, even though they heckle the show and say, oh yeah, you guys stink and all this, guess what? Next week, where are they? Right back up in the balcony, the best seats in the house. And if you're talking about wrestling or mixed martial arts, whatever, Front Row Ringside is really the place to be. And people always said, well, are you going to get a name like Talk is Jericho or the Steve Austin Show or something? I like the Shadowfire Promotions podcast because, SFPP, it kind of made, it had a little bit of alliteration. But when trying to come up with another name, we just kind of had Front Row Ringside, and it kind of came to us. And we're like, yeah, that'd be good. We don't want to ditch the Shadowfire Promotions brand name because that's very important. But having the name be kind of subtitled Front Row Ringside is something that's very, very cool as well. So we're going to kind of continue to call this show Front Row Ringside. So that's about it for now. I've given all my shout-outs to everyone. Please do me a favor. If you're listening to this show, go ahead and share it with someone. Go ahead, if you want to chuck me some cash, do so. We're going to talk about social media here real quick. Going to give out my social media plugs. I'm at Facebook at facebook.com/SFP Inc. Chicago. That's SFP INC Chicago. Twitter.com/SFP INC Chicago. You're going to find me in those two places with social media. Right now I don't have a Pinterest. I don't have a Instagram or anything like that right now. Those are going to be the only places that you're going to find me. All my links are going to be on my official site, sfpinkchicago.com. You're going to find all those links there, so make sure you bookmark them. Make sure you go, follow us on Twitter. We're on YouTube. You're going to find the audio of these podcasts. If you're not on iTunes, you're going to find it at YouTube, youtube.com/sfpinkchicago, and you're going to find video clips of things that we're affiliated with. You're going to find, trailers for Hitman Hart. You're going to find stuff with Roxy Astor's Afterglow fan party, clips of that, and just really anything that we're affiliated with, you're going to find on our YouTube channel. We've got a Daily Motion channel. We've got a Vimeo channel. All this stuff. DailyMotion.com/SFP Inc. Chicago. Vimeo.com, Vimeo.com/SFP Inc. Chicago. Really, there's going to be more material in the YouTube channel than on Daily Motion or Vimeo just because of the realities of traffic, and YouTube gets more traffic than Daily Motion or Vimeo, so that's where we're going to be. Though we're going to start trying to use more of our other channels to put stuff and get some exposure there too, so you're going to start seeing stuff there. So I think, let's see, now I do think that's about it. I think we've given all of our little shout-outs and everything that I've had to do. I've given our social media links. Make sure you hit me up online, sfpinkchicago.com. Give you some email addresses. If you're a fighter or a wrestler that you want to appear in this podcast, if you're a fan, you got an opinion, you got a question, anything related to this podcast or any future editions of the podcast, you want to send your emails to podcast@sfpinkchicago.com. If you've got a question about any product, any merchandise, anything related to our products, our merchandise, anything like that, questions, concerns, whatever, send them to orders@sfpinkchicago.com. If you are a fighter or a wrestler or a wrestling promotion or fight promotion and you're interested in talking to us about distributing your merchandise, I'm going to give you a website link. If you go to sfpchicago.com, you're going to find a link about halfway down the page that says Let SFP Distribute for You. That link will take you to distribution.sfpinchicago.com/vendors-new.htm. You're going to find all the information there you need to go and distribute your merchandise for us. It'll hopefully answer all of your questions. In the meantime, you can send an email to distribution@sfpinchicago.com, and we will give you the link there, and we'll say, hey, here's the links, check it all out. Make sure you put in the subject line of anything you do, whether it's to podcast, whether it's to orders, whether it's to distribution. Make sure you put something in the subject line that's relevant. Question about podcast, pro wrestler, I want to appear in the show, wrestling promotion. Something that lets us know what you are, so when someone sees it, they don't tag it as spam and blacklist it. So make sure you do that, all right? So that's about it for now. So I will see you all next week, front row, ringside. Take care.